Hi, welcome to this week's segment of Everybody Has a Story. We're very lucky to be joined today by Natan Sharansky, who is the head of the Jewish Agency in Israel, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Israel, and formerly one of the most famous political prisoners in the world when he served 9 years in a Gulag prison in Siberia under Soviet rule. His memoir, Fear No Evil, was published in 1988 in the United States and has been translated into 9 languages. And his latest book, Defending Identity, Its Indispensable Role in Protecting Democracy, was published in June 2008. Mr. Sharansky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you've talked a lot in the past about oppressive regimes. You know, you suffered under an oppressive regime. You said in the past that the most dependable weapon of an oppressive regime is their ability to create an enemy and point to that enemy and unite their people around it, and therefore subvert the people and repress their rights through uniting their people around this enemy. Is Israel and the United States, or are Israel and the United States serving as that enemy for a country like Iran by talking of airstrikes, by having this kind of bluster war talk?
Well, look, the United States and Israel are free democratic countries. They can have many problems, many challenges. Some of the groups can feel that their rights are undermined. But it is the countries where government depends on their people. The people are electing their governments. And so the government has to do everything in order the citizens will feel themselves comfortable with this government. The citizens would like to vote for the government. The situation with countries like Iran is absolutely opposite. The government doesn't depend on people. People depend on the government. The challenge of the government is how to control the minds and the lives of the citizens. And so there is no better way to control the lives of the citizens but to have an external enemy, to have permanent atmosphere of mobilization, that we have an enemy and we have to be mobilized to fight against it. For the fundamentalist Iranian regime, such enemies are enemies of the Muslim world. And no doubt that they are developing nuclear weapons not in order to have America as or Israel as the enemy, but they need Israel as permanent enemy in order to keep their own people under control.
Now, President Obama just visited Israel recently, a few weeks ago, in late March, and I want to read a quote from his speech. He said, he appealed to Israeli citizens saying, "Put yourself in the Palestinian shoes. Look at the world through their eyes. It is not fair that a Palestinian child cannot grow up in a state of her own and lives with the presence of a foreign army that controls the movements of her parents every single day." End quote. Do you agree with that statement, and what is Israel doing to make a Palestinian state a reality?
Look, first of all, of course I agree with the fact that it is not good for Palestinians that we control their lives. It's not good for Israel that we control their lives. And as I was saying practically from the day I came to Israel when I was released from prison, that I'd like Palestinians to have all the rights that I have. I don't want that Palestinians will have an opportunity to destroy me. And in the situation when practically all the leaders of our countries that are around us, and all Palestinian leaders, they now are preparing their own people to destroy me, I have to be very careful how I am building peace and how I am helping the Palestinians to be masters of their own fate. And unfortunately, as passionate appeal as President Obama has to us, it will have no power, this appeal, if this appeal, as passionate and as strong, will not be to the leaders of Palestinians. It's not the leaders of Israel are the leaders of the free country. So they are interested in peace for their own political success. Unfortunately, the Palestinian leaders are leaders who are trying to keep their own people under the control, or trying to who prefer to keep their own people in refugee camps and to make sure that their hatred towards Israel will be permanent fact, because that's what helps them to control us. So yes, I agree with President Obama that it is not good when Palestinians don't have their own state. But it has to be added that the state can exist only when it doesn't threaten to destroy us.
Now, last week's negotiations with Iran stopped with no sign of progress, and actually Israel ended up giving Iran an ultimatum to cease their nuclear program operations or face military action. What do you think the probability and the timeline are for Israeli military action in Iran?
You say about Israeli military action as if you exclude in advance opportunity that the free world will have a military action. Iran, the challenge is not the same challenge to Israel. Of course, the hatred of Iran to leaders toward Israel is obvious. But the Iranian challenge is the challenge of totalitarian regime to have the weapon of mass destruction and to blackmail all the free world. The free world, if it wants to continue being free, cannot afford it, cannot permit to Iran to have it. So we do believe that the time is running out, that during this year, Iran has to be stopped from developing nuclear weapons. It was proved again and again that our intelligence from 10 years ago, from 5 years ago, was much more correct than predictions of CIA that there is no threat of Iranian nuclear weapons. Today it is clear that there is a threat, and that the threat of this year. And they think that this year the free world has to act. And it will be very unfortunate if Israel will be left to its own to act alone.
Now, you suffered horrible conditions when you were in prison in the Soviet Union, and you participated in hunger strikes. Just this week, a Palestinian prisoner died in Israeli custody, and it sparked a wave of hunger strikes. And 2 Palestinians actually were shot in the protests, but the Palestinians claim that he was not treated adequately by Israel.
Well,
are those charges baseless? And separately, are hunger strikes a legitimate form of resistance?
as the one who was for 9 years in prison, who was for many years in solitary confinement, was for a year and a half in punishment cell, and who spent hundreds and hundreds of days in hunger strikes. Of course, they can feel sympathy and understanding to the other person who is in prison on hunger strike. But with this, similarity finishes, because I was in the prison of totalitarian regime when I was isolated from all the world. I didn't have lawyers who could see me. I couldn't send one letter to inform about my situation. The Red Cross was not permitted to have any access to me. Nobody in the world could come and check my conditions. And Israel is a free country which is controlled by the independent courts, where every prisoner has his or her lawyers, when free press can describe exactly what's happening with everybody. And where this specific prisoner for years had a cancer disease, was going through the treatment of this disease, the Israeli doctors and the other doctors had free access. And so if it happens so in our world that people are dying from cancer, if some people decide to turn it into the political provocation and to declare that this death of cancer was the result of difficult conditions in prison, so let's not permit these provocators to play with the world.
Now, Naftali Bennett, a right-wing politician in Israel, won 12 seats in the Knesset in this year's election. What does that mean for Israeli politics, that such a hardline voice would gain so many seats?
Naftali Bennett, who is considered to be right-wing, representative of right-wing party, got 12 seats. Yair Lapid, who was widely believed to be emerging liberal left-wing voice, got 19 seats. What it says? It says all that Israel is a vibrant democracy where everybody can participate in the elections. Everybody can compete for the votes. And it's not accidental that in today's parliament, 1/3 of all the elected officials are new faces. That is the power of democracy. New people with the new ideas are coming and replacing those who were representing Israeli politics yesterday.
Now, there's been a lot of controversy over a woman praying out loud at the Western Wall. And you've had some things to say on this. I'm wondering, what is the probability of having a separate section at the wall that's not controlled by the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, and where men and women can pray according to their Reform or conservative beliefs?
Well, I am glad that in your question you go exactly in accordance with my ideas how to solve this problem. I believe that we have that Western Wall is the most important historic and religious monument and symbol of the survival of our people over the thousands of years of struggle and prayer and dreams of our people to go back, to return to Zion. And I believe that we will be able very quickly to come to understanding that one Western Wall should serve to one Jewish people, and that every Jew in the world will be able to express his or her prayer or solidarity with our people in the way he or she is used to do it.
Now, I want to end by shifting to your history, your story, because I think a lot of people watching, especially a lot of people at Yale, would be really interested in hearing about certain things in that background. You talk in your book, for instance, about how you turned to the classics in prison. You were able to read, Cervantes and Homer and Sophocles, and we're at Yale, a liberal arts institution that very much a lot of people value those texts. Why were they important to you? How did they help you get through?
Well, in prison, when you are under threat of death, and KGB secret police explains you that it is your choice, or choose life, what means cooperate with us, what means go on press conference and say publicly that we, Soviet regime, are right and you dissidents are wrong, or it will be death. And you have to explain to yourself why you are not choosing life. And you have to explain to yourself that what they propose is to go back to be Soviet slave, to say things that you don't believe in it, and to belong to the history to which you don't want to belong. You want to belong to the history of free people who are fighting for thousands of years for their freedom. And when you understand that the aim of your life is not physical survival, but the aim of your life is to remain free and true to your inner freedom, you'll find out that classical heroes or classical literature, these are the people who are giving exactly the same answer to this question, whether it is Antigona, who prefers to demonstrate loyalty to her family, even if it means death, or it is Odyssey, whose curiosity makes him to face the challenges of life and death, or Don Quixote, of course, who everybody thinks that he is ridiculous and he is inappropriate and so on, but in fact his values are the real values of moral person who want to remain moral even under the threat of death, or many other classical heroes. So it was really very important to me during the interrogations, being under the threat of death, to mobilize all these classical heroes to support me, and as if they were telling me, you see, there are things for which it is worth to live and worth to die for. And that was absolutely opposite to the message of KGB that there are no values in the world for which it is worth to die. So save your life and cooperate with us.
Now, you've talked about the moment when you heard about Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech, called Beautiful Moment. And I'm just wondering, when did you become cognizant of this global spotlight you were in as a political prisoner? Obviously, it was rare that you got newspaper clippings in the prison. This was that rare case. But when did you become aware of just how big a spotlight the world was shining on you?
I didn't know, of course, how big is the struggle of the world from my release. By the way, the speech of President Reagan, we found out about the speech from the criticism, from the attacks in the Soviet press on President Reagan. So it said nothing to us about struggle for our release. We were very happy to know that the leader of the free world understands the real nature of the Soviet Union, and that was giving us hope. But look, in 9 years that I was in prison, I had 2 meetings with my family. During these short meetings, of course, I could hear something, but I never could imagine that there is such a huge struggle all over the world for my release and the release of our friends. But on the other hand, I always believed that Jewish people, that the state of Israel, and that my friends, the democratic dissidents all over the world, continue the struggle. I believed, I hope that they will continue. I was sure that KGB is lying when they say that at the end of the struggle nobody is interested in your fate. But to know, no, there was no way to know about it, and that's why the only driving force to continue the struggle was to remain a free person in prison in spite of all the pressure.
Natan Sharansky, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us. This has been this week's segment of Everybody Has a Story, YTV. See you next time.